right.
All right. It's great to have you, Richard. I think this is the first time we've ever spoken.
Yes, it is. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, great to see you. And I wanted to speak about the Russia Ukraine stuff because we've kind of come to the same conclusions on that topic. You used to be more on the pro Russia side, and you've changed your position to some degree. But let's first get into the alt right thing. So, what led you like away from that scene? Was there any? I saw an interview clip where you said that there was a lot of like disgusting type people. The grug
Freaks, yeah, it
grug
should have
thing.
always
Yeah,
been
yeah,
about me. Sure. Sure,
yeah.
yes.
The
I
grug
mean,
thing. I kind of agree
rather
with that.
arrogant and rather arrogant thing to say, but maybe not wrong.
Yeah, there's like this skinhead trailer park faction. I don't know if you were aware of all that stuff back. You met some of these like tons of these people, right, back in the day. So what do you make of that
Yeah.
faction of it?
Well, I mean, there is that faction. I think there was in 2016 through 2018 thereabouts. I think COVID might be a sort of bookend on that period, but there was a kind of new version of that, and it guys who were into weightlifting, martial arts clubs, and basically they wanted to fight. And that, I guess, is manly on some level, but I think it's something that you should be suspicious of. A lot of psychopathic personality types are really attracted to radical movements or extreme movements, not in spite of the fact that you might, anger your neighbors or offend your grandmother or get in a fight, but because of that. That's almost the feature and not the bug. And they are genuinely attracted like a moth to a flame to something that is deemed evil, uh, or
Yeah,
dark, etc., illegal. And I think it's very problematic. I mean, I think that was a big problem with the alt right in general. It went from 0 to 60 in 2.2 seconds flat, but it wasn't really a car with an engine or full of fuel that it could have uh, taken a journey somewhere. And I think a lot of that was its lack of any sort of coherent ideology. And outside of Trump, really, I mean, it was Trump. We we're white or mostly white, and some of us think the Jews are up to no good, and some of us don't. And women
right.
are kind of terrible too, but we don't really have something coherent to say about that. And I think but that lack of ideology, I think, emerged from what it was. I mean, I created a website in 2010 called alternativeright.com. And there was a lot of interesting discussion going on there. We we would have a article by Kevin McDonald. We'd have an article on paganism. I would write on politics and sports, and we had a lot of interesting
Yeah.
discussion going on. There's something happening, something emerging, you could say, but it was all fledgling, and I was doing very similar things with Radix Journal, which was just sort of a continuation, basically, of alternativeright.com. And but I'm not positive that's really where the alt right came from. I do think the alt right emerged more precisely from 4chan and related, groups like that. And I think it emerged to a large extent from a place called TRS, which is still around to some degree, the right stuff.
Yeah, the schizos.
Enoch and
Yeah.
company. Yeah, I mean, you could call them a lot of different things. But there was something positive about it. I mean, just to be fair, the the outrageous quality of the Daily Show, a podcast, and the fact that they were sort of open to anyone and everyone, and they would do a parody song, they would have a serious discussion, they would make fun of people. There's something kind of positive about that in a jock way. But I think the problem with the alt right as well was that everyone had a podcast, and you received authority because you were either most outrageous or basically had the most popular show or something like that. Now I
Mhm.
understand that as a metric, but I think it can be a very bad metric. And so I don't think there was a lot of coherence to the alt right. I remember in right before the Charlottesville rally, I issued like a 20-point "This is who we are" type thing, and I would stand by a lot of it for the most part. Some things I've evolved on, but that was sort of an attempt to nail theses to the chapel door, but to do it in a sort of vague way. I don't think the alt right was ever really contributing something to the intellectual discourse. And what was most powerful about, say, 4chan bots, or and by bots I'm referring to people, and by TRS, was like doing a raid of the comments section, or making David French cry, or yelling at a
Mm.
journalist or something. It was never fundamentally serious. And
Yeah.
the fact that it supported Trump, like the alt right loved Trump and supported Trump in 2016, large extent in 2025. It, there was this like magical moment where the establishment conservatives hated Trump. National Review, the neocons, et cetera, et cetera. They all hated Trump. And so it was this weird moment where the trolls won. And the trolls could at least somewhat plausibly say, like, we're the future, we're moving forward. Trump listens to us and not you. We know how to win. We understand politics better than you. That's a pretty wild one. But that was a moment in time, and I think that was a moment of delusion in many ways. And if a movement is built in that way, I don't think it can ever get to the point that I to a point of a movement that I would really want to be a part of, because you never get past the fact that everyone is pandering to or catering to Red Eagle 1488 on this Discord server, or Sally who made out with 12 guys at the last conference, and her feelings on the
Yeah.
Jewish question or something. You just never
Right.
get past this mob, and the mob can turn on you. The mob certainly turned on me. Like, whatever. I'm glad the mob turned on me in a way, because I was ejected, and I pulled the ripcord myself. We were a mutual, parting of ways. But I just don't think it can go anywhere, and I'm not really surprised that they're still on the same hamster wheel. 7 years,
Oh yeah.
8 years later. It's just
Yeah. They
it
just
can't go anywhere without leadership. But yeah.
right. I think it's really become infected with the schizo faction. You see
Hmm.
these delusional conspirator types, pushing flat Earth and mixing that together with Hitlerism now, with like Stu Peters type of clownery. You got like Fresh and
Yeah.
Fit and Jake Shields. Obviously not really intellectuals. They think Europa: The Last Battle is like a real history movie, and they
Hmm.
regurgitate this crap. I mean, it's become like it's memeified. They've memeified the movement. It's just 4chan memes reposted, regurgitated, and yeah, it's not that serious. I mean, I like Martin Sellner. I think he's a serious guy. He's doing a lot of good stuff. Um, he never really got involved with those types of people, and does his own thing. So, do you think there's any
Did he though?
like I mean,
One,
he's
I have to
somewhat
push back a little
a
bit
couple
here
interviews.
because, well, I have to push back a little bit here on people like that who sort of they take a surfboard to various waves. I mean, there is no
Wow.
doubt that for European identitarians that they were riding the wave of the alt right in 2016 and 2017, and maybe you could say riding something else, and
Mm.
pandering to the alt right, using the alt right's aesthetics and terms, and they still do to a large extent. Now, I do. I If you want to criticize the alt right and what it was, I think you have to sincerely reflect on it. And I saw a lot of people, many examples come to mind, who kind of like, oh no, once there's a huge amount of heat, once there's Charlottesville and all the backlash and lawsuits, et cetera, that emerged from that, it's kind of like, oh no, we're not like that. We're not like that. Well, you were trying to ride that wave when it was available, and now you're going to try to ride a different wave, and maybe there'll be another wave. So I'm not trying to pick a fight here, but
Mm.
I would push back on people who sort of fence ride and then claim a lack of responsibility afterward. But just saying.
Mm. I think they avoided the most problematic elements, like the people that William Pierce called the cosplay types, the dress up types, the
Hmm.
LARPers. Even Pierce, who was pretty radical himself, called those people toxic, and they're just history hobbyists who want to resurrect some kind of Third Reich bit, and it's
Right.
not going to go anywhere. It's never gone anywhere. Usually ends in something uh, like the assassination of Rockwell. I mean, that's pretty much where that ends, and just
Yeah.
furious infighting, more or less. So the Russia stuff. Let's get into that. So I
Hmm.
don't know if you remember back in the day, that was one point we probably agreed on most things back then in 2017, 2018. But the Russia thing, I was one of the few people that was pushing back on this and critiquing this Russophilia that was permeating. The Dugan stuff was definitely seeping into the alt right at the beginning there. Heinbach was pushing it. TRS still
Oh yeah.
pushes it. A lot of these outlets were writing that, or they're attempting, in my view, to kind of get some shekels from the Kremlin. That's what it looked like. They're pandering in order to get something back for it. What was the thinking there at the beginning when you were into that?
Well, I think you could say that they were pandering for rubles. I
Hmm.
do think that there is there was a lot of sincerity actually, and I think that in a way makes it worse, if you understand my meaning. But I I when I look back at my own personal history and intellectual history, I was never a Russophile in any way. I was When I was in college and graduate school. I was interested in the Cold War and strategy. I remain critical of America and Americanism, but I certainly would never take the side of the Soviets in a conflict like that. And I sort of I unquestionably understood what was going on. It's actually when I was at Duke graduate school, I was interested in Kojev and the European concept, and even the Kudenhova Kalergi and Adenauer, as these people sort of reaching for a European concept. So that was my background. Now, um, a but I do understand the idea of America is so fake and gay that Russia must be better, and Putin's a dictator. Putin threw Pussy Riot in jail. Ha ha ha.
Yeah, that's the logic.
America invaded. Yeah, America invaded Iraq on false premises, and et cetera, et cetera. I get it. And I was a part of it. I mean, I was on RT a number of times from about 2011 to 2016. And I don't know, I was a sort of foreign policy analyst, I guess, if you would call me that. And I would say a lot of these things. Um, Now, there was also the
Right.
situation with my, oh, are you not hearing me?
Yeah, I can hear
Oh,
you. Yeah,
no.
go ahead.
Oh, was that just something else going on or?
No, 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 nothing. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay. The signal's fine, right?
Yeah, let me ask the chat. Are you hearing us? It looks like it's good.
Okay, good. Um, so now there's a situation with my now ex-wife that certainly inflected matters, and I can talk about that. Talk about it seriously. Don't want to get into any
Yeah. How much influence
personal
did she
battles.
have? How much influence did she have on pushing you in that direction? Because she was obviously part of the translation of Dugan's book. She was definitely hugely into that stuff and was a Russian chauvinist.
Yes,
Um, so did she
correct.
suck you into that framing, that mind framing?
Yes, I think that's a fair thing to say. And I mean, look, to be fair to Dugan, I do think that he it can be a very interesting guy. I don't regret, in the sense of working on and publishing his book on Heidegger that was published into English. At one point, it was actually banned on Amazon due to sanctions. Not that it was bringing in any sort of money that could be taxed. I mean, it would sell, I don't know, a dozen copies a year or something. But um, uh, it is what it is. I mean, he can. There's aspects of Duganism that are interesting. As a phenomenon, he's interesting because whether Dugan is directly influencing the Kremlin or the Kremlin is directly influencing Dugan, I think is something that's a debate that can be had. But regardless, as a phenomenon, I think Dugan is interesting and worthy of analysis and criticism, obviously, in that regard. Now, there's some other sinister aspects of Dugan that I could get into, but I guess I will now. I have been shown by someone who's researched this a memo that was written in English by Dugan on basically laying out the land of the far right. And it went something like this, oh, there's some libertarians out there and they love guns and gold and they like Ron Paul and they hate NATO and American foreign policy. There are some traditionalist Catholics out there and they don't have strong opinions on foreign policy, but they're starting to hate the government over abortion or religious freedom, et cetera, et cetera. There are some neo pagans out there. This is probably the group that I would be associated with. They've read Fay and Nietzsche, et cetera, and they have a different worldview that is uh, antipodal to America, so they can be anti-NATO as well. There are some, well, and just the list went on. There's probably 12 of them. And I think his assessment was accurate. It was the assessment of someone in some ways engaged in an influence operation, or you could say engaged in espionage. It was how can we
Mm.
use the far right to promote our agenda? The agenda is simply the demoralization of the West, by which they mean the military alliance that is NATO, that is directly facing them. The Kremlin and the Russia will accept all sorts of comers. You can be a black nationalist. You can be a neo pagan. You can be a Catholic. You
Hmm.
can be a libertarian. So long as you end up at the point that NATO is evil, you're good. They want you. So RT, to its credit, RT, and using this as an example of the Russian propaganda method, RT isn't just propaganda in the pejorative sense that we usually use that term of, Russia wonderful, come live in Russia, Putin's so smart. It wasn't that, actually. They would have Abby Martin on, who's a sincere leftist, probably Marxist inflected at least. And she would talk. She would even criticize Russia. They would have Alex Jones on. They would have Richard Spencer on a few, dozen times over the course of a few years. They would have Martin Zellner on to talk about identity in Europe or whatever. They're willing to
Mm-hmm.
tolerate pretty much anything so long as they are deconstructing any sort of positive, moralizing master narrative about the West and NATO having a purpose. And so they
Right.
were highly ecumenical or tolerant, I guess you could say. You could be a total libtard and they would accept you so long as you were good on that one issue and so long as you could be viewed as engaging in a general demoralization. I think
Mm.
Dugin was very interested in the far right because, in a way, we were the only ones who would have him. If you're going to get a hearing anywhere, it would be with Arctos or with myself publishing the Heidegger book or in some of these nationalist groups. Now, I think Duginism and the Kremlin have moved on since then, and they moved on to greener pastures. I don't think Dugin cares that much about, say, me or the alt right or anything like that. Arctos could publish his books whatever. I don't know how many of those are being read. Uh, they have moved on in a way to MAGA and the mainstream right. And
Mm-hmm.
I noticed this in 2022, and it really stuck with me. It was an episode of a program called Candace, done by the Daily Wire. So it was Candace Owens. And she was in an Oprah like setting. I guess they were trying this out, it didn't work. They had Jack Posobiec, who is a highly suspicious person. I don't think he is a U.S. federal agent, by the way. I am of the opinion that he's working for another government. He's married to a Belarusian wife, by the way, who ran a yogurt stand before getting into politics. I mean, a remarkable rise. Um, so she had Jack Posobiec on, and they were talking about the recent invasion of Ukraine. And Jack
Mm-hmm.
Posobiec said, "Oh, you have to understand. See, Ukraine's not a real country. It was a mistake that they have sovereignty at all. Referendum in 1991. I mean, did they mean it? Of course they didn't. And the languages are the same. It's like a dialect. It's like you're speaking Southern slang as opposed to a Boston
Yeah.
accent or something. It's
Daily
the same
Daily
language."
Stormer Daily Stormer was pushing that nonsense too. I mean, these people have no clue what they're talking about.
Yes,
They were just saying whatever they
I
thought they
was
could to
pushing the
deconstruct.
nonsense.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I was pushing the nonsense. And keep in mind, they started, even in Russian official documents, they would put out statements starting to use like on the Ukraine and a preposition. I don't speak Russian, but as opposed to in the Ukraine as a sort of rough English translation. So they were already depicting it as a territory as opposed to a state and a nation. And what I heard from Jack Posobiec, and of course, dumb Candace Owens, who's,
Yeah, the
clearly
dumbest of the dumb.
retarded. Yeah. She's just nodding along. Oh, yeah, oh, yeah. And he's saying the exact same things that I said in 2014 and that were, to be honest, I would associate with my then ex-wife as well. There is a list of these talking points. They don't need me to do it anymore because they now have Candace Owens, who has millions of views on YouTube and is reaching a conservative audience that I simply don't reach. And so
But
I think the problem of Russian influence is very deep. It's much worse now than it was in 2014.
so maybe some people might be wondering because there was absolutely an infiltration campaign when they saw the alt right rising. They took interest, and I guess the alt right took interest as well, and they're like, oh well, enemy of my enemy is my friend. I mean, you had people like Nick Griffin go to the Kremlin. He says it's Russia's turn to rule Europe. You've had
Oh
people like
God.
people like Heinbeck. People like Heinbeck were saying
At
something
least
like
I
that
never
too.
said that.
Yeah, Heinbeck said we want to be the Syrian rebels backed by Russia type of thing. Then you're right, Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon met Dugin in 2018 and said he wanted to forge this
Yes.
U.S. Russia alliance, which has not panned out at all. To try to peel China away from Russia, this is a complete failure. But they're still kind of shilling it. They paid tenant media people to shill. You saw the Tim Pool clip where he's like, "Ukraine is our greatest enemy," and all this stuff.
Oh
And so
yeah,
you're
banging
right.
the
They have
table. Yes.
you're right that they have switched from maybe courting the alt right. You had Charles Bosman, maybe he's the closest it comes to like the alt right, who was like a pure Russia shill, and he was involved with TRS. But they've moved on to the mainstream conservatives because
I
they're
met him as well.
yeah they're willing to spew this
I'm just
stuff
going to
for
move in
money.
here to get better Wi-Fi, and yeah,
Or so
yeah.
did
I
they
hope this is
ever
better Wi-Fi. Sorry, I'm not at my house at the moment.
did they ever offer you money though? I mean, some people might wonder that. Was there any kind of offers for
No.
you to become? So it was purely an ideological thing.
Yes. They no. There was never any sort of offer of money, and I don't. Uh, I don't know. Were they pushing, pulling strings and pushing buttons on my behalf? Uh, Perhaps, but I think they also quickly dumped me, and so I don't really know what to say.
Hmm.
I was taking the bent of we're so um, we're under siege here in America. None of this is working. Maybe Russia is the. I didn't believe that, and I certainly now 22, and there were some of these like gripers who came up, and they were attacking me for criticizing based Putin or whatever, and they were just directly talking about getting funded by the Kremlin. Like we will be his insurgent troops on the internet, and he'll just send them Bitcoin or something. And I was just like, look, if something like that happens, like the FBI is going to be up your ass in no time. This is just a terrible idea. And again, as I think as I said, I think there are bigger factors at play. I think there are absolutely people who could be reasonably assessed as Russian assets in mainstream conservative media. They don't need the groypers. And by asset, I that could mean someone who is knowingly involved with this type of campaign, and it could be a kind of useful idiot who's an asset, someone who's innocent of what is going on behind the scenes, but is playing the game and can play along. In my opinion, tenant media is the tip of the iceberg. So tenant media is a response to the decline of RT, or you shouldn't even say decline, just the end of RT after the invasion. And what are we going to do? I had heard people talk about this before, including my ex-wife, of why are they spending all this money on a television studio, journalist around to report on stuff that costs so much money anyway? Why not fund alternative or independent creators? And they did that exactly with tenant media. And again, if
Yeah.
you look at what was happening, someone like Lauren Southern, who was, I knew her back in the day with the alt right, of course. Um, did she know that she was getting paid? Well, I think it's a little bit ambiguous and maybe a little bit suspicious, to be honest. There are some indications that, Destiny said things like, you got to get me some of that Kremlin money or whatever. Now, was that a joke? Because Destiny reportedly had some sort of fling with Lauren Southern. Uh, Good on Destiny, I guess. I'm impressed.
He's pro
But
Ukraine
was
though.
that just simply a passing joke? He is pro Ukraine, absolutely. I'm glad he is as
Yeah.
well. And also, when he talks about Ukraine and some other things, Destiny's actually quite good. So
Yeah.
that's great. He was that a joke? Kremlin money is Lauren Southern posting photos of her in a sports car, etc. Is does she know? Did she know what was happening? I would imagine that. Oh, they said Spencer's Wi-Fi is lagging even more now.
Yeah. Okay. So
It's
just
bothering me. Let me go back to the previous place.
shut off your camera maybe, and we'll see if it improves. And
Okay.
we'll just do audio. Okay, we'll try that for a minute.
Okay.
So Lauren Southern,
Yeah.
yeah. So she and Brittany Pettibone went and interviewed Dugan. I think a lot of these influencers were using Dugan to as clickbait. They thought he's a big name. We could use him to get attention, and they're doing the bit that Russia's more conservative, based in trad, and it's all based off of half truths and lies. Of course, I mean Russia is not this base trad haven. I mean, there's all kinds of alcoholism. The church attendance is low. Abortions are high. It's really PR, is what that is. It's good PR that they use to dupe conservatives, to dupe Christians, right? Um, Christians are, it's very easy for Christians to fall into this crap because they're so desperate for a savior that if Putin comes out and says nice things about Christianity or lights a candle in a church, then they're sold and they will back that side no matter what.
Exactly.
Um, and so there's some kind of useful idiot faction. There's also paid people. Tucker Carlson, I mean, I think it's just undoubtedly he's been co-opted. I mean, the guy seems like he's on call. They call him up, hey, come interview Putin, come interview Lavrov, oh, come interview Dugan. I mean, he was shilling their side throughout the entire war from day one, and he seems completely obsessed with discrediting Ukraine and justifying the war.
I think that Tucker Carlson is an asset. Uh, Whether he is aware of it or not is up for debate. But I, I'm of the opinion that he is actually well aware of it.
Because he asks them no serious questions. He goes there like a little dog and just sits there and lets them roll off. I mean, with the Dugan interview, he even said, I'm not going to ask you about Russia. I just want to hear you criticize America. And that's it. And that's not journalism. That's not journalism at
No,
all. So this is Dugan says
no.
blacks are less fraudulent than whites. I mean, this is like really slop shit. Like Ukrainians are collective transgenders. So I think Putin dropped the transgender thing in his war speech as well because he knows that's great slop for the conservatives in the West. Glenn Greenwald interviews Dugan and he says the globalists are the real racists. So he's kind of taking that Dinesh D'Souza shit and he's spinning it. Glenn Greenwald went to Russia and says, I came to Russia to combat the US's toxic view on the country. What I think happened with him is that he got famous pushing the Snowden story, and that was his claim to fame. But once that died out of the news cycle, he needed a new bit. And so journalists really are grifters, right? Once one thing loses its play, they have to jump on another thing. And his new thing is just shilling for Russia and combating any negative claims about the country, and that's pretty much what he does now.
Well, remember there's a lot of suspicious aspects to Glenn Greenwald's claim to fame, uh, which was the Edward Snowden case. I mean, Glenn Greenwald was a bit of a figure during the Iraq War. Now, keep in mind, Glenn Greenwald endorsed the Iraq War. I mean, people forget that. I want to know, where were you when the rubber hit the road? I don't want to know, where were you like 4 years later, or something like that. So Glenn Greenwald was a pornographer and a lawyer, and then he was a sort of go-to civil liberties guy uh, uh, in Washington, and but he endorsed the Iraq War, and then he turned on it and complained about civil liberties and blah blah blah, which I find to be just sort of a kind of, I don't know, a very secondary or tertiary issue. And then even the Edward Snowden. I mean, what do we think of Edward Snowden? I mean, there are a lot of suspicious things. Edward Snowden is living in Russia right now.
Right.
That in itself might lead us to believe something. The Chelsea Manning or Bradley Manning issue. Chelsea Manning, once her sentence was commuted, was actually involved with a lot of alt-right figures. She sort of famously denounced Charlottesville. I remember she had like a big jackboot on, and she was like "smash the fascist" or whatever. Okay, I haven't seen that before, Chelsea. But she was also hanging out with people who I think are quite suspicious. One of them, who is that journalist? I'm forgetting her name at the moment. Uh, she's kind of famous for having a big rack. She worked
Fairbanks.
at RT. Yes,
Hmm.
exactly. It's funny. I had to say one
She's
thing.
she's screwed up. Yeah,
Um,
she's like
a
Sputnik.
literal Russian employee.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And
Yeah.
she's
Uh,
the conduit.
Go
She's the
ahead.
conduit between Posobiec, Bannon, these figures that got pulled into that Dugan orbit as well. I think that there's always some kind of connection there with the Kremlin. And then Julian Assange, of course, operates in that network, and he had a television show on RT, and
Yes.
he outright
Let me go back
refused
in
to
here.
publish um, documents critical of the Russian government. I mean, he wouldn't leak anything that was embarrassing to Russia, which is
Right.
suspicious if he's a whistleblower. He's against government corruption, except when it's the Kremlin. So these people, I
Yeah.
mean,
Exactly.
Max Blumenthal's within that scene as well. In that sector, he's shilling massively for the war in Ukraine, even though he's
Yes.
like supposedly an anti-imperialist. I mean, they've all showed themselves to be total frauds. That like George
And they
Galloway.
flipped on a dime. Yeah.
Yeah.
Max Blumenthal and company turned on a dime. They started shilling for Assad and Syria the moment Russia went in, basically. So, um, yeah, these people, and I think there's a sort of type. Look, and I know this sounds self-serving, but if you're a little, you either need to be a little dumb or very, or have zero scruples. So I don't think Fairbanks is terribly intelligent. I think she can kind of do her job. Greenwald's intelligent but shallow, but I would imagine he has zero scruples just looking at his life story. Lauren Southern, is she really all that intelligent? I think not. The whole tenant situation was a kind of, attack on midwits in many ways, using midwits as assets and giving
IQ
them the right
test. Yeah.
talking points. It's kind of an I don't I know this sounds self-serving for me to say. I'm well aware of it, but I have an ability to reflect on things. I have an ability to evolve, and I have an ability to change. And I'm no one's dancing monkey. And
Mhm.
that's not what they want from an asset. And,
For sure. Yeah.
Glenn Greenwald, yeah, you're like a brave truth teller. It seems extremely one-sided what he does. It seems very polemical in the sense that I feel like he's a kind of gun for hire. and a useful person to associate with an attack on American intelligence that I think characterized the whole Snowden situation.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. And what's amazing about all of this is the blind spots that these different factions who have endorsed this Kremlinite propaganda have. So you have the anti-imperialist left, who massively shill for imperialism when it's done by Russia, right? You got these Hinkle has freaks who
Right.
say that, oh, we're global anti-imperialists, and then the second that Russia does actual colonialism, because that's what this is, it's Russian Lebensraum expansionism to Russify people and take their land. They're all in for it. Same
Yes.
with George Galloway. Same with Abby Martin. None of them criticize imperialism and expansionism when it's done by their benefactor. But then on the other side, you have these right wing supporters of Russia who generally would be against something like multiculturalism. But then when Vladimir Putin supports multiculturalism in Russia and says we're a multicultural state and it's the strength of Russia to be multicultural, they have no criticism of that. When Russia dumps Central Asian Muslims into Ukraine, they have no criticism of that. I mean, they're doing like an ethnic style cleansing of Eastern Ukraine and Russifying the
When
region
Russia
with,
creates the refugee crisis, you know, I mean,
yeah.
like that, the refugee crisis is largely a result of Russian actions in Syria. Secondly, and even more damningly, the refugee crisis was encouraged by Russia using these refugees as a sort of weapon against the West and other countries and funneling them. So
Mhm.
it's just crazy. I mean, you can even think of it as a kind of like problem, you know, offering the both the problem and the solution. You create these refugee problems in Syria, probably, I mean, no doubt, unintentionally, and they had geostrategic goals by going into Syria, but nevertheless, you spark this catastrophe, and then you get in bed with the people who are going to benefit from the backlash. That is, these ethno nationalist right wing parties that are all throughout Europe, or the alt right, or just largely mainstream conservatism, MAGA now. The other aspect, and there's been a lot of deep research done on this, is the connection between Israel and Russia. So one of the talking points of the pro-Russia people is that, you know, Zelensky's Jewish, and you know the Zionists love Israel, or
Right.
Ukraine is going to become a new Zion. The Jews are moving to Ukraine. I don't
Yeah.
even know what the hell they're saying.
It's
It's
total
it's
crap.
not like the almost. I mean, there's no. First off, just to be fair here, because I'm fair, there are no doubt many Jewish neocons like David Frum or Bill Kristol who are cold warriors in their bones and they support Ukraine. So you can make a sort of case, but you're ignoring the overwhelming reality, which is that Netanyahu and Putin are partners. Netanyahu campaigned with massive banners of Vladimir Putin in order to reach towards some of these Russian immigrant, quote unquote, Jews who are in the broader Likud coalition. The amount of sharing of technology, and even Israel as a conduit to avoid sanctions in order to get uh, tech and materiel to Russia, excuse me, is documented. Um, I, I mean, it goes on and on. It's Russia and it's Israel and Russia. I mean, this idea that like Ukraine is a Jewish plot is absurd. And I, for one, think Zelensky is a very brave person. He's no doubt of Jewish ancestry. Interestingly, he was actually himself sort of sympathetic towards Russia and campaigned on being more dovish towards Russia, not
Yeah.
before the invasion. That is, I think he's been brave. I imagine he's a very secular person, and if I were to guess, a kind of agnostic or atheist. But the fact is, I don't care. And to imagine him as some Jewish plot to defile the West, as opposed
Yeah.
to imagining him as a colorful character, a comedian put in this extraordinary situation and acting bravely on behalf of his country. That's that, what you see is what you get. Like it's simpler than you imagine. It's not a plot. It's actually very simple. He is a person with a very colorful background as a comedian. It's like electing Will Ferrell to the presidency or something, who is has proven himself by acting bravely, by remaining in Ukraine when he didn't need to, and by making tough decisions that were necessary to maintain his country's survival. And that includes not fleeing and fighting back. That includes begging for money, if we're being honest. That also includes entering into a deal with the Trump administration that's pretty advantageous to the U.S. And that's
Yeah.
who he is. It's very simple.
Yeah, I mean, the fallacy is that you have to love Zelensky to defend their sovereignty. This is absurd. There could be anyone running Ukraine, and I would defend their sovereignty. It doesn't
Well, I
matter
love lose.
the ethnic.
I'll take the bait on that one. I actually love Zelensky.
Yeah, well,
I mean, you don't have
the
to. I
whole
agree with your point, but I'll
the
sort of double
whole
down. Actually,
the whole Jewish plot thing is one of the dumbest memes to come out of 4chan. All they did was took a headline where Zelensky says Ukraine will be like a big Israel insofar as that the streets will be manned with soldiers. It was just a security comparison. That's it. It had nothing to
yeah,
do with what are they going to depopulate 40 million people and bring a couple million Jews into the country. If anything, Jews have left Ukraine. They've gone to Israel and they've depopulated Jews out of Ukraine, if anything. Secondly, Jews have died in the war. I pointed this out to them. They're trying to do this dumb shit where they're like, "Oh, they're controlling both sides." So why are Jews fighting in the war and dying in the war? There's some Israelis that joined the Ukrainian army, and both sides. There's Russian Jews that are being conscripted and fighting in the war. There's some volunteers on the front lines. Why are they dying in the war if this is all a plot? And then you have like this guy Kolomoisky was arrested and charged with embezzlement and stuff like that. And he actually said that Ukraine should turn back towards Russia in 2019. And it was the U.S. Foreign Minister or Secretary of State Anthony Blinken who is the one who pushed for charges against Kolomoisky. You know,
interesting.
Zelensky has had beefs with a lot of other Jews in Ukraine. He had some of them stripped of their citizenship. Uh, they have lost billions of dollars, like the oligarchs in Ukraine. I think like 4 of 10 are Jewish, and they lost billions because all their businesses are being blown up. This rabbi in Russia came out against the war, and then he fled Russia.
Interesting.
The daughter of Abramovich came out against the war. A number of the Russian oligarchs came out against the war. So if it's all a Jewish plot, why is Israel neutral, and why are all these Jews criticizing the war, and why are Jews dying in the war? They have no explanation for any of this because the world is way more complicated than Jews versus Gentiles. This is their whole worldview, right? They think every geopolitical upheaval in the world has to be boiled down to Jews versus Gentiles. No, there's no real Jewish ethnic interest in this conflict. Jews happen to live in Russia and happen to live in Ukraine, and they take the side of whichever country they happen to be born in, and that's it. It's not about being Jewish. Zelensky's an atheist, and his wife is Christian, and he's met with Christians and so on, right? Like, just crap
I
stuff,
would.
man.
I agree more or less with what you just said. I would add that these people who think Ukraine is a Jewish plot conveniently overlook the clear ties and alliances between Israel and Russia, and the degree to which any sort of criticism of Jewish influence with Zelensky can be the same could be said times 100 for Vladimir Putin. And thus, their entire argument is just ridiculous. It amounts to like dumb anti-Americanism, Russian romanticism, or just a sort of sadism of taking the side of this, aging empire as it smashes a fledgling little state. Um, the other one that I think is very important, with, Tucker will reiterate this with Victoria Nuland, and going back to 2014, where it was like, fuck Europe, was the line that was picked up, that was leaked to the press, and that was broadcast everywhere. And they seem to be indicating that that means that we're going to do a coup against the rightfully elected leader of Ukraine. We're taking over Ukraine and not letting the people decide, or something like this. Nothing really could be further from the truth. So the first off, the "fuck Europe" comment was actually, when they were negotiating with Yanukovych's government, and it was basically a way of giving in a little bit to Yanukovych, and not putting. Yeah, you've got the article ready at
Yeah,
hand. You were two
yeah,
steps
we
ahead of
got
me, of course. Not
it. We
putting
got it.
Klitschko in right away. He's not ready was a euphemistic way of saying he got hit in the head a few too many times, and basically playing ball. And we're going to go forward with this. We don't want we don't want outside input. So that whole like smoking gun is not a smoking gun in the slightest bit. First off, their argument makes no sense. But secondly, it was an example of working with Yanukovych. Yanukovych ran a successful campaign in 2014 that looked a lot like a conservative Republican campaign, whether they were copying it or whether they were getting some tips from, who was Trump's guy, Manafort at the time. Who knows? But he promised to enter the European sphere. The second he won, Putin called in some deaths, you could say, pulled some strings, and Yanukovych flipped. There was a natural, understandable, legitimate public reaction to that, because particularly younger people don't want to be part of the Russian sphere. The Russian sphere is gray and ugly and impoverished, etc. The European sphere, whatever you want to say about it, Europe, their gay pride parades in Berlin. They accept gay marriage in Paris. Blah blah blah. You can make these criticisms of the West being decadent. I get it on some level, but look at it from the standpoint of a Ukrainian with any sort of optimism or idealism. They clearly would rather become a part of the EU than a part of the Russian sphere. Yanukovych reneged on that. There was popular outrage in the streets. This is what happens. I wouldn't doubt if some guys in the CIA might have, like, I don't know, pulled a few strings or something. But to think that the CIA created it, that it's all fake, that they were holding a gun up to the back of every protester to get them to say nasty things about Yanukovych or Putin, is completely absurd. It was organic, in the entire, and so it's like, again, you treat all of these things that make Ukraine seem so positive and good, that they're looking towards Europe. They want to be part of a wider European community. They have a bright future. They possess optimism. They want to, yeah, sure, get rich and have fun, but that they want to be Europeans. And of course, the white nationalists are like, no, you shall never be European. You will
No,
be
you shall be
you will be
Eurasians.
killed.
You,
Yes,
you,
you're going to be Eurasians. We're going to drag you back into the Soviet Union, kicking and screaming, you bastards. We're going to
right.
kidnap your children and make them speak Russian. I mean, the white nationalists are either extremely deluded and or they are just simply sadistic. They want life to be shitty. They want life to be Russian. They want life to be awful. They want the West to get worse. They want America to fail. I mean, that's my only, interpretation that
Yeah.
I can
Well,
make.
they're accelerationists. They think losing is winning. They think destruction is good because it opens up opportunities. But they're talking about a country they don't even live in. They're talking about the
Right.
destruction of a nation thousands of miles away from them, and they're cheering the destruction of that country, even though it can't really achieve anything for them on their own home soil. And the absurdity and contradictory nature of their stance of, we want a monocultural ethno state, but we support the multicultural non-ethno state of Russia as it, defaces the ethnic homogeneity of Ukraine with Muslims and Central Asians and Chechen rape soldiers who are, committing war crimes. It is sadistic. There's some kind of sadistic element to this thinking. It is the nihilistic rage, of the internet incel type of thing. It's
Yeah.
sick, really, at the end of the day. And yeah, the Newland phone call, just to go off that, it had no, she's not talking
Hmm.
about doing a coup, like you said. She was talking about a deal that Yanukovych proposed to bring Yatsenyuk and Klitschko into the government to share power with him to make a deal. That's what she was referring to. And she said, fuck the EU, proving there was no coordination with the EU. So it wasn't some grand conspiracy. And on top of that, once
Right.
once once the revolution succeeded, Ukraine was not brought into the EU, nor were they brought into NATO, and they've been basically held back. So if the purpose of the coup, spending billions of dollars to overthrow a government and then not bring them into the institutions you want to bring them into, doesn't make any sense.
Yes. You said it better than I did. Yes.
So this is the latest from Dugin. He's saying our fight in Ukraine is not only for ourselves, but for Chinese, Indian, Islamic, African, and Latin American guys to get opportunities thanks to our war. This sounds like DEI, global DEI.
Парней китайских, индийских, исламских, африканских, латиноамериканских парней, которые тоже получают благодаря этого возможность, благодаря нашей войне. Мы несем на себя, как обычно, русский человек берет на себя миссию гораздо более широкую, чем мы сами. Многие не понимают значения, не до конца понимают значение нашей войны, но мы отстаиваем иной миропорядок, справедливый, честный, основанный на традиционных ценностях.
So this sounds like to me like some global version of DEI where he's saying we need to empower these non-European races and countries and make things more fair and have like affirmative action, but we're going to be trad and we don't like the trannies, so get on with it, guy.
Yeah. I'm sorry, but we're doing white supremacy instead. I mean, I don't know what to say to this. I'm actually dead serious when I say that. I mean, this is the kind of resentment politics of Putin saying the golden billion, as if it's
Yeah.
somehow due to luck or something like that, that the West is the West and the rest is the rest. It's just absurd. No one would tolerate this if it were said by a black lesbian in a congressional hearing. Yet when Dugin says it, it's trad, because the third world's based or whatever. This
Yeah.
stuff is so unappealing. I can't even put it into words.
Well, Putin's even come out supporting BLM and saying they're committing a genocide against African Americans.
Baltic ways.
Like,
If,
there's a
if a
clip
group of
here.
blacks move to Russia, learn Russian, become Orthodox, and say they are Russian, would you accept them as Russian?
Yes, exactly, absolutely. The Russian is about heart, not about the skin, about the center, not about surface.
The latest program to cancel world literature was conducted by the Nazis in Germany 90 years years ago. We remember that footage when they were burning books. It's impossible to imagine such a thing in our country, and we're insured against this
Oh,
thanks
yeah.
to our
Right. They don't ban books in Russia, do they?
culture, and it's inseparable for us from our motherland, from Russia, where there is no place for ethnic intolerance, where for centuries representatives from dozens of ethnic groups have been living together, and cultural diversity is the pride of our society, the strength and priority of our state.
Blew himself up with a grenade.
That's exactly what Joe Biden says. But when Joe Biden says it, it's evil. It's shit lib. It's the
Right.
end of the world. But when Putin says it, zero criticism from Kolad or these types, right?
Right.
And
I think probably both Joe Biden and Vladimir Putin are, both of them don't mean it. I think they're both sort of
Hmm.
lying. I mean, that's just breathtaking to to say about the Soviet Union. I mean, the idea that ethnic conflicts didn't exist, like even in recent memory, like in my own lifetime. I mean, that is
Right.
absurd.
Did
The
did the
notion that
Chechen Wars?
intolerance or censorship could never occur in our country. I mean, I don't know how you could say that with a straight face. And it's also kind of sad in a way, I would say, with on Putin's part, because he's like he's like mimicking the American talking points circa 1997 or something. He like heard this vaguely at some conference he attended after the fall of the Soviet Union, and he's now declaring that that's like the essence of Russia, or even coherent with the Soviet Union. It's just sort of sad. It's like someone who's very far behind, and so they're not even up on like the current politically correct propaganda, and so what they say kind of clangs. It's like a dissonant note. I don't. Yeah, it's utterly pathetic to hear this. But yes, Putin is not your friend. Do not ever think that that man who said those things and is doing what he's doing to Ukraine is a friend of any kind of European nationalist, however defined.
Well, he's explicitly against nationalism insofar as it exists in Eastern Europe. And the hardcore nationalists in Ukraine are also against being under Kremlin rule. They're against the EU, but they're also against being under Russian rule because they have their own identity. And he's trying to erase that identity. That's the inverse of
Yes.
nationalism. It's imperialism. And he's doing the same thing inside of Russia by promoting multiculturalism. There have been massive ethnic conflicts going on in Russia. There's the Muslim terrorists have conducted dozens of terrorist attacks throughout Russia. They had 2 wars with the Chechens under Putin. The
That's what I
second
was
one under
referencing.
Putin's one.
Yes, I would say even within recent memory. I'm a little bit suspicious. I guess I might be a truther a bit about the terrorist attacks at the very beginning of Putin's
Yeah.
regime in Moscow and elsewhere. But I certainly take your
Well,
point. It's not like Muslim terrorists don't exist.
well, they just had one at the Crocus City
To put it
Hall, and
plainly, I think Putin did those things.
Putin tried to blame the Crocus City Hall attack on Ukraine. It was Muslim terrorists, and he blames it on white people. Like, but he's the savior,
Yeah.
man. So we've
Yeah.
seen those clips. I guess the last thing we can touch on is these whole peace talks thing that's going down. This here says that Putin said Russia has enough forces and means to bring what we started in 2022 to a logical conclusion with the result Russia needs. And he said this in a film. So it seems like he was holding out this whole time for hoping that Trump would cut off aid to Ukraine, and then he can continue to take territory and force Ukraine to surrender. But it's not
Yes.
totally worked out. It's not totally worked out to what he was thinking, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, I actually made a prediction after Trump's election, and it's been a rocky road, but I think my prediction is going to be correct. And that there will be a breakaway from between a break off between the happy marriage, ostensibly, of Putin and Trump. So in 2022, Trump is saying things like this invasion, it's so smart, it's so smart. But what really happened is that Putin was convinced, I think he was largely convinced by the Afghan withdrawal, the debacle that was, that the US just didn't have the stomach to do anything. I think he was convinced, rationally convinced, by Obama's failure to do anything about the seizure of Crimea in 2014, that we can take this country in 3 days. In 3 days, we can have show trials about the Nazis who ran Ukraine, and we can fully integrate Ukraine into the Russian sphere. And there was a caravan across the country. They wanted to take Kiev. I don't want to hear from any of these people who are, saying like, Russia's winning and it's been this just amazing triumph after triumph when they acquire a few hectares of land here and there. The Ukrainian invasion has cost Russia many multiples of the casualties that they suffered in the Afghanistan campaign in the 80s that might have caused, or I should probably say catalyzed, the collapse of the Soviet Union. This campaign has been catastrophic. I don't think anyone can take Russia too seriously as a force that can now, absorb Poland, go back to East Germany and take them back and all that kind of stuff. I don't think anyone can take that seriously. NATO has now expanded. The geostrategic loss of Finland is devastating when you just look at the geography of the situation. Ukraine is now armed to the teeth, mad, angry, and more of a nation than it ever was. So this thing has been a debacle. The entire Russian economy is on a war footing, and I don't think that I think there are many forces within Russia now that wouldn't even want to end the war if Putin said so tomorrow morning, because their whole economic incentive is to continue this thing going, send more soldiers out there, make more munitions. They're on a war economy. It's war socialism, and thus no one is incentivized to end the war. It's actually a huge problem. Anyway, my prediction back after the election was that Trump will talk big about how he can bring the two sides together and make a deal, and it will be over in 24 hours or what have you. My assessment is that Ukraine, at the very least in Putin's mind, is an existential issue. He does not believe that Russia can exist without Ukraine, geographically speaking. And keep in mind, the Ukrainian referendum immediately led to the dissolution of the Soviet Union over Christmas. So back in 1991. So there is good reason to believe that Russia does not have a leg to stand on without Ukraine, because Russia is not a Western or Central European country where it's a nation state. It's tightly packed. You've got armed borders. You're facing off against different people. It is not that. It is a massive space that can only be managed as an empire. Russia is an empire before it's a nation. Or it's, if you understand my way of thinking here, the ability for a German army, and we think back to the Battle of Kiev in the Second World War, and as well as the invasion into Russia, the ability of a German or a European army to march to the Caspian and knock out the Soviet Union is very real. And geographically, there's a funneling like effect in Ukraine. Ukraine is essential, at least in the mind of Putin, and probably, to be fair, probably in my mind as well. It's essential to Russia existing as an empire. And thus, this is not like the way you hear JD Vance talk or Trump talk in many ways. It's like this whole thing was some big misunderstanding. What caused the crisis of 2022? Oh, I don't know. Maybe because the Russian Empire reasserted itself. Clear what all of this is about. It's about geography and geostrategy and the ability of Russia to maintain itself as an imperial bloc and not be divided into 100 pieces or be absorbed by the West or just die out. So it was something existential. Putin is not going to be convinced by Donald Trump or anyone else to just end it due to glad handing and some passing a bottle of vodka around the table while you talk about how you can get this whole matter settled. He does not want to end it. He is not incentivized to end it in the slightest bit. And so all of this talk of Trump, the art of the deal, et cetera, is just total nonsense. And so my prediction was that Trump will eventually basically take up Russia's side. What does it say here? Just completed my 2-hour call, President Vladimir Putin, Russia. I believe it went very well. Russia and Ukraine will immediately start negotiations towards a ceasefire and, more importantly, an end to the war. The conditions for that will be negotiations between the two parties, as it can only be because they know details in the negotiations that nobody else ever would. The tone and spirit of the conversation was excellent. This is nonsense.
Yeah, he thinks it's going to happen. I mean, he's acting as if Putin is immediately going to come to the table. This is what he was saying back during the ceasefire talks, and Putin started bombing Ukraine even harder during that. And so,
exactly. This is not happening. There will be a point where I think JD Vance is highly suspicious. I dislike JD Vance, personally speaking, and I think his ideas are bad as well. Trump is different. Trump doesn't have an ideology. Trump is just Trump. And if he keeps doing this with Putin and he keeps running up against the brick wall that Putin is not this good guy who had a misunderstanding back in 2022. Zelensky owes him $100 for drinks that night. I mean, he won't pay up. What's the deal, man? We might have to go to war. It's not about that. It is so much bigger than that. You're not going to convince them to change. And at some point, Donald Trump will recognize this. I didn't vote for Trump. I don't like Trump, to be honest, but I think he actually will do the right thing in this situation due to Trump's own personality and due to just the reality of the situation. I think Trump will at some point recognize that Putin has no interest in making any sort of deal, that at this point he's fighting for his life, quite literally fighting for his life in attempting to defeat Ukraine.
What's asinine is that Trump seemed to recognize that after he was trying to get them to sign the ceasefire. Ukraine signed it immediately, and then Putin bombed Sumy and killed 30 people on Palm Sunday, and then Trump said, "I'm very angry with you, Vladimir." but then he's back on the wagon again, and now he's saying, "Oh, we had a great call, Vladimir." So this is just, he's buttering him up. He thinks this is going to work. This is art of the deal shit. But it hasn't worked. It hasn't worked since he's got into office. He thought he would be a piece of cake. He says on day one, we'll get the peace deal. Day one. And now we're 3-4 months in, and there's not even close to a deal. And Trump is making a fool of himself, really.
It's art of the deal shit, as you say. Like in the book, The Art of the Deal, I remember, I haven't read it in a number of years, but I remember one anecdote of this guy who he was a good real estate developer in his time, but he made some bad choices and he went broke, but he didn't want to sell. And Trump kind of came to him and he's like, "Listen, man, we're going to make this great. You're going to be proud of the property. No one will ever make fun of you. This is just a good way out." And the guy eventually relented. It's like art of the deal or whatever. This is not Manhattan real estate. Like you
Yeah, it's
like none these things just they don't transfer, and maybe they transfer a little bit, but when something transfers like 20%, it might as well be zero, because it's just a different game. You don't It's like throwing a football around the baseball field or so. You get my metaphor.
he
It's not the same thing.
Trump thinks kissing the guy's ass is going to get him to the table. That like he's Putin has shown that if kissing his ass is actually does the opposite. In fact, he only respects strength. When Tucker Carlson went and got on his knees for Putin, he criticized Tucker Carlson and says he's a little bitch.
Yeah,
Who's this little bitch in front of me kissing my ass? I want hardball questions. Like
who got rejected by
Putin.
the CIA.
Yeah, he
He was
slapped Tucker
demeaning
around.
him. Yeah.
Yeah, so Putin respected Joe Biden more because he said that Joe Biden is like stern at the negotiating table, and he doesn't back down. Now I don't like Biden, so don't take that clip out of context, you schizos. But that's what Putin said because he respects strength. That's a fact. And so this
Mhm.
kind of ass kissing bullshit absolutely won't work. In fact, it will probably work against Trump here.
No doubt. I mean, look, I hope I'm right, and I hope my prediction's true that Trump will turn on Putin at some point. But it's been a rocky road, and yeah, I saw this today. I This looks like JD Vance is in Trump's ear or something, and
Well,
they're trying one more time to get him
this
to butter him up.
there is like this Russophile network around Trump. You got Tucker, you got Curtis Yarvin, who's around the JD Vance circle, Bazobiak, Bannon. All those people tend to have this Russophile angling to stuff, and then Trump Jr. is also like a Zigger return.
Yes.
So you got that influence as well. There's one super chat that says, Richard, what interview did Candace call Ukraine a fake country? Also, do you think Martin, Galloway, Stein, Assange are paid directly by Russia or just anti-West frauds? Cheers from New Zealand.
So I think I mentioned this. So there was a Daily Wire show that was called Candace, and it was an attempt for her to be Oprah, I guess. It had like a studio
Yeah.
audience and things like this. And it happened shortly after the invasion. I don't know the exact date. Let's say summer of 2022. But Jack Posobiec was there. Now it might be difficult to find because perhaps the Daily Wire has gotten rid of these videos, but I'm almost positive that you could find them somewhere.
Well, when the war started, Candace Owens went on her show and she says Ukraine's a fake country. She was repeating the Putin bullshit, and she got the date wrong for when Ukraine became an independent state. I mean, she's an idiot. She doesn't know anything about really anything. I mean, she's a flat Earth tard now, and she's pushing
Space
the
is
most.
not real. Yeah, I mean,
She's pushing
it goes on and on.
the most wacky JQ mangling conspiracies now. It's just what the fuck happened to these people? She actually used to be a little bit more intellectual when she wasn't doing the JQ stuff, and now she's just completely insane. Like,
She's always been terrible. She was invented by Alex Jones. I mean, this is the sort of irony of the situation. Uh, Paul Joseph Watson and Alex Jones basically invented this chick as this girl who had turned on the left and like awakened to Trump. This was back in 2017, and she
yeah.
had this weird career, I guess, on the left where she wanted to make a kind of AI doxing machine of sorts. Like if anyone criticized you, you would put their tweet into a box and it would come out with like their tax returns or something. I don't even know what the
Yeah, I
hell
remember
she
that.
would.
I remember that.
It would never work, but whatever. And then she sort of turned on the left, maybe due to pushback to that notion of hers. And she was invented by Alex Jones and then ultimately promoted by the Daily Wire. So, Ben Shapiro can hate on Candace Owens' anti-Semitism, if you want to call it that. It's a weird anti-Semitism, as you point out. and her space, flat eartherism, space denial, vaccine denial. The list is endless. But at the end of the day, like he is responsible for this chick. Like he platformed this girl that she is who she is. Her entire career was embedded in Candace Owens getting interviewed by Alex Jones, and he's like, "Tell me again why you hate Hillary Clinton. It makes me really
Right.
hard. Just say it one more time. Like, you're black, right? My genes say that you're a conservative black lady. You know, I don't know. It was just a disaster. Uh oh.
Testing. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know what's wrong with my camera. There we go. So she started off on Alex Jones. I didn't know that. I thought she
Yes.
started off on PragerU and then TPUSA. Or no,
That
maybe
came
that's actually.
after she was discovered by Alex Jones, and yeah, she got in trouble
Well,
with TPUSA for saying that, like, I mean, again, it's just this like mangled right wing thing where
yeah.
it's like Hitler was cool before he started invading other countries. And she was like
Right,
trying to.
right, right,
I don't
right.
even know what she was. I don't even know what she was
Yeah.
attempting with statements like that. It's just this garbled gobbledygook, basically.
Oh, but now she's saying he's just fully cool in it. So,
Right.
but uh,
And he was
yeah,
Catholic, and he hated space, and yeah, all.
yeah, she was the perfect storm for these people because she's black and she's anti-liberal or anti-left, and they just don't want to grift her because that's so it stands out from the crowd, and so these media charlatans love that stuff. They will like. Actually, I live in Spain, and there's like a guy like her. He's this
Mhm.
black African from Cameroon, but he supports like the most right wing party in Spain, and he's like made a career out of this. So it's a nice little grift, actually. I mean, these guys know what they're doing. Um,
Definitely.
Let me just check if there's any more super chats, and we'll call it. Jordan Simmons says, been a follower for years now. Keep up the good work. Thank you very much for that. Let me just check on Rumble. If there's any good comments in here. Candace did expose BLM, but her pivot to conspiratard is annoying. Yeah, I mean, I like some of her stuff. I mean, back in the day, she was exposing BLM and the left, but she is an autistic contrarian like Tucker, like Posobiec, like these people. It's whatever the regime says, I'm against that. But that's
Hmm.
retarded. I mean, so if the government is like defending the border, then that would be bad. I mean, like it doesn't even make sense. I mean, these people don't really have a worldview then if they're just the opposite of what they think is the establishment. You
Exactly.
know?
Exactly. You have to be willing to like give the establishment its due in a way to understand that it's dealing with bigger issues. You have to be able to agree with the left on occasion, or no one can take you seriously because all you are is a kind of contrarian or partisan hack. And so, yeah, it's
Yeah.
definitely how I feel. I want to ask you a question, actually. So I'm following you, and I noticed that you were at the re-immigration conference. And so, what was
Mhm.
that like? What was going on there?
Yeah, I met Martin Sellner when he came to Spain actually 2 months ago, and
Hmm.
he's a good guy. I like a lot of what he does. I like his direction. Some people chirp at me in the comments saying, "Oh, he's a Duganist and he's tied in with them or whatever." There wasn't really any mention of that at the conference. Eva Vladerbrook or whatever her name is,
Ava
she
Blandon slut. Yeah.
she was there. I
Sorry,
mean,
I don't want to ruin a friend.
she's maybe the most like schizo Kremlin chill, but she didn't talk about that. I mean, the whole conference was about just remigration and we have to end immigration and
Sure.
stuff. So it was a good conference. There was Jared Taylor was there, a few other people that I'd
Interesting.
never met before there. So it was kind of cool. I mean, it's just a good way to network and meet people in a similar sphere. So my friend invited me, so that's why I went.
Yeah, that's good. How many about because it had to be done quasi secretly, is what I understand. Like the
Yeah,
venue wasn't announced or something.
the venue wasn't announced until the very morning of the thing, and despite that, there was probably 250 to 300 people there. And
Wow.
yeah, and there was media press outside the venue and everything, mostly Italian media. So it was a legit thing. It got coverage in Italy at least. Um,
Interesting.
yeah. I don't. Have you ever met Sellner? I mean, I assume there's some
I've never
relation.
met him personally. No.
No, okay.
Yeah.
So who would you support on the like? Who would you think would be somebody that's good on the right, or do you think they're all slop content creators? Is there any particular faction or person that you think is okay?
Me.
Yeah, like, or you've totally abandoned any support.
I I
But
mean, I don't I don't really know what to say. I mean, I what does your girlfriend tell you? You do you, boo. I mean that's sort of how I feel. Um I'm I do my own thing on Substack, and you can join us, and we do every Sunday we do what I call Alex U, and it's we do a close reading of the text. We're actually reading Exodus from the Bible at this point, and we also talk about world affairs, stuff like this. And but we're working on a much broader project with Mark Brahman, who's been a longtime friend and collaborator with me, going on like 15 years or so. And we're working on the Apollo project and REM theory and so on. And we're trying to make an intellectual contribution, create an intellectual school in many ways. And, you know, I don't know, a lot of that stuff that I said about the right, and I think you echoed in many ways, that it is sort of inherently schizophrenic. It is sort of an anti-intellectual on a lot of levels, and it's just very problematic. I do feel that way. I feel that more can be accomplished when you're working on your own stuff and driving forward, marching the beat of your own drummer, um,
yeah,
than to kind of create a movement. I think I don't think it's going to work. So that's just my opinion,
yeah,
though, and my experience, though.
yeah. There is a mob politics element to mass movements, and there are these shibboleths that they create, and if you don't support their shibboleths, they will attack you and throw you under the bus. There's some of that going on, but I think even on the right, some of my work and people like Johnny Gatt and stuff, I think we've actually changed a lot of people's minds, especially on this Ukraine thing. I was talking to people at that
Yeah,
conference, and a lot of them agree with me actually. When you get down to it, the whole Kremlin support thing, the peak of that was maybe 2017, 2018, but it's pretty much like dying down quite a bit, especially with all those like retarded like Dugan clips coming out where he's like, "Oh, the West is racist." So I think it's dying down. Honestly, like there's very few holdouts on that stuff. Maybe like TRS and like David Duke are still shilling that stuff.
yeah,
Um, but I mean, those guys have just gone completely off the rails. I mean, I guess Jake Shields is willing to platform that stuff now, but he's willing to platform communists like Jackson Hinkle and other retards. So, but I think we agree
yeah,
that there's way too much slop, garbage, bullshit content going on, and
yes,
it's all motivated by just self interest and clicks and just incoherent ideology, right?
yes. You and Adam Green, you're doing good stuff. I've always had a soft spot for JF, even when I disagree with him vehemently. I think he's at least pushing forward in a direction. So, yeah, I mean, I like people who challenge me and make me reflect on assumptions and so on, who can change my view. And I don't. I think the right. It's funny. I'll leave on this because I feel like we're wrapping up. But I saw this
Yeah.
tweet from this character named Rachel Haywire, who is I actually met her many years ago, and She says, "Oh, the right needs a PR firm or something," and it's like the right, and I think she meant the dissident right or whatever they're calling themselves now. The dissident right is just a big PR firm. Like it doesn't need a PR firm. It's all about it. It's all about like drafting on certain cars, like getting behind them and getting a better aerodynamic. So you get behind Trump, you get behind some Euro nationalist party, you get behind Brexit, you get behind this. But it's not really about contributing anything. It's not really about saying something that's so powerful that it reaches beyond our bailiwick or our ghetto, you could say. And thus, it's all sort of mutual reinforcement, shibboleth, and mutual PR. And I just can't take it seriously. Uh, but anyway, I sound bitter. That's not a good look. But I really enjoyed talking to you. I would
All right.
love to come back on. Just give me the word, and I'll be here.
Appreciate it. Yeah,
And
thanks so much. Thanks so much for coming on. I appreciate it. I think I'm glad you've come to some of the same conclusions as me. I mean, for many people, it just takes a bit longer. It takes a bit of self reflection. Stuff happens in their
yeah,
life, and you get a new perspective. And that happened to me as well many times. I mean, that's if you have the same views like from 10 years ago today. I mean, there's probably something wrong there.
yeah.
But anyway, thank you for coming on. Thank you to the audience as well. I appreciate y'all. And you can subscribe to Richard at your Substack, I believe.
Yeah, yeah. Just go to my Twitter page and you'll find it. But it's rateexternal at substack.com. But yeah.
Perfect. All right, man. Have a good night. Ciao.
You too. Thank you.
All right, so I'm going to finish with this other super chat here. I saw that Fight Sport Talk sent a second one. Thank you very much, Fight Sport Talk. This is pretty much the same question that you asked before. You said, Richard, do you think Galloway, Martin, Duke, Assange are paid directly by Russia or just anti-West empire because of its lies? So let me let's see here. So let me just go back up to see. Yeah, that's the same question. I can try to answer that. I mean, I think that. Well, George Galloway is paid by like Sputnik, right? The guy is like a radio host for Sputnik or some offshoot of Sputnik. So George Galloway is on the payroll of Russia and has been for a long time. He's collaborated with RT. Very clear. I mean, he's a sadistic psychopath. He's a degenerate as well. George Galloway is known for having bizarre sex fetishes, and he's on Big Brother, and he was like pretending he's a cat. He's a sick SOB, but he's always been anti-West, and he admits that he's only against imperialism when the West does it. He's only against imperialism when it's America or NATO, but when Russia does imperialism, he's all in for it. So he's not anti-imperialist. George Galloway is a lying sack of shit is what he is. Abby Martin, same thing. Duke, are you talking about David Duke? Assange, really the same thing. He's just this anti-West thing. So I'll only expose corruption when it's the West doing it. But when Russia does it, or China, or any other country, we won't talk about that. Now, it's not to say I like these Western governments. I always have to make this caveat that I don't love the government to criticize this other government. It's just not how it works. I don't have to love Zelensky to be critical of Putin's policies there, right? In fact, I've criticized Zelensky. I mean, I wouldn't vote for him if I were Ukrainian. He's not right-wing enough for me. David Duke, I think David Duke is just... he's like delirious, man. He really believes in the savior myth. I mean, he was trying to do that with Trump. I remember when Trump came out and said, like, he made some like pro-Israel, or no, he was moving the embassy to Jerusalem, and then David Duke came out and he's like, base 40 chess. This is actually a massive blow to Jewry or some shit. It's like, what? I mean, these guys are cooked out, man. They're just drinking. They're drinking vodka spike. They're drinking vodka spiked Kool Aid, and he's doing the same thing with Putin. He's like, this is a massive blow to Jewry, man. And this is why I'm saying this JQ thing has become. It's because it's so mangled to the point where they're just inventing the most crackpot conspiracy theories to justify their little fetish. The war in Ukraine has nothing to do with Jews, right? Just because Newland and some neocons in America are Jews and support Ukraine, they're acting in this case as Americans and not as Jews, right? Now, when it comes to Israel, maybe they're acting as Jews and not Americans. But when it comes to Ukraine, they're acting as more as Americans than as Jews. And they're basically just taking the side of the American government, right? That was the position of Obama. And so as a member of the Obama administration, she's going to take that position. There's no actual Jewish interest in Russia versus Ukraine. There's Jews on both sides. There's Jews in both governments. There's synagogues that are being destroyed in the war. Jews have had to leave the country and go to Israel. Billions of dollars have been lost. All the main oligarchs in Russia and Ukraine have lost billions of dollars because of the war. All their businesses are being blown to smithereens. It's not good for business. It might be good for like a couple of businesses that are producing weapons in other countries, but not in Ukraine itself. And most of the Russian oligarchs, some of whom are Jews, maybe about 20%, but not the overwhelming majority. But most of the Russian oligarchs were against the war in Ukraine, right? And they were critiquing the war, and some mildly, because you know what happens when you come out against Putin? You're either dead or in jail. What else do we got? Jake V says, Duke is severely memed here. Jake V says, the opposite of the Jewish thing. This ends up distorting you from having a clear set of eyes on descriptive reality. Definitely. I mean, I think the war in Ukraine actually is what got me rethinking that topic. Because I was like, these guys are saying that it's justified to blow up a whole country and wipe it off the face of the earth because they have a Jewish president, man. And this also got me rethinking the Hitler shit, because this is what Hitler said. And this was the logic Hitler used to attack Russia, right? Anytime he wanted to invade some country, he'd just be like, you're Jews, man. Oh, look, there's a Jew in your government, man. So you don't deserve to have a government, or you don't deserve to have a nation. It's just a fucking excuse at the end of the day. He's not saving you from them. He just wants to do what he wants to do, what he was already planning to do. He's using that as an excuse. I mean, the way he wielded that against the Soviet Union was so disingenuous. This is a guy who was shaking hands with Stalin, Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. Like he helped Stalin expand the Soviet sphere of influence into Eastern Poland, the Baltics, and Finland. He actually pretty much sided with Stalin against Finland and said Finland should surrender and we're going to be neutral. And then he blocked shipments from Italy to Finland. So he helped expand the Soviet Union. And then when he wants to invade them, and then privately he's like, yo, Stalin purged all the Judeo-Bolsheviks. And he did. He purged most of them. He kept a few of them around. He purged Trotsky, Zinoviev, Kamenev, Yagoda, all the main ones he got rid of. They either were dead, died, or were killed, or fled the country, or were killed later, like Trotsky. And then he fired, Litvinov, who was his Jewish foreign minister. He fired him, replaced him with Molotov. And the reason he did that was to buddy up with Hitler, right? He was saying, oh, well, Hitler doesn't like this guy. He's Jewish, so we're going to replace him. And then he signed Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. The only Judeo-Bolshevik that remained was Lazar Kaganovich, and he was totally loyal to Stalin. And there's an interview with Kaganovich where he says that he doesn't even identify as Jewish, and he justified Stalin's purges against specifically Jews. And he says it was good. The Jews are prone to anarchy and they should be purged out. And he says he doesn't identify. So that guy is totally loyal to Stalin. I mean, he's a communist before anything, right? That's a case where ideology trumps national identity or national origin, or he just identified as Russian. And so then Hitler starts spewing that out again. Like he privately was like, "Oh, Stalin Slavified Bolshevism, kicked them all the Judeo Bolsheviks out." And then when he invades, he whips it out again, and he's like, "Y'all are Judeo Bolsheviks, and we're gonna take you out." Right? It's just tactical bullshit, man. Good comments, though. I appreciate it. Subscribe to the channel. This is Martinez Politics with an X. Also, the Telegram, Martinez Politics with an X. Hit the thumbs up button on this stream right now. Thank you very much. I'm going to have to boost this one up here. I'll leave the entire interview up. I'm not going to take this one down. I think a lot of good information was brought out. What else are y'all saying? Yeah, so if you have any more questions, throw them in now. I'm probably going to end the stream here in a minute. I think it was a good interview. We didn't get derailed too much or off topic. I tried to keep it on point. Didn't want to go too much into the alt-right stuff. People kind of know what went on there. But he did give us the backstory of how he changed his view on this topic. And yeah, I mean, shouldn't really hold it against someone that they change their opinion about a topic. I mean, that's totally normal. Totally normal. Jake V says, no inquiries. Favorite interview in a while. I like Richard. I appreciate it. We got to get up to at least, before we end it, we're going to get at least 30 likes on this stream. So go and hit that like button right now if you're on Rumble, and subscribe to the channel. Click the follow button. We got 27 now. Fight Sport says, what do you think about Putin and Netanyahu alliance, even though Putin funds all of the Bibi's biggest enemies? Yeah, that's an interesting one. Bibi's a little cuck to Putin, isn't he, then? So Bibi's on his little bitch knees to Vladimir Putin. And that also kind of deconstructs the idea that, like, he's all powerful or something. I mean, why is he cucking out? He can make America move, but he can't make the Russians move, so he's not all powerful then. He can't make the Chinese dance, well, then he's not all powerful. I mean, he can't even make Trump dance on all cylinders, right? Trump is now beefing with Netanyahu, right? So, I mean, I don't believe in this kind of puppet theory of politics. I think there's definitely influences, but no president truly is some kind of pure puppet on a string. I mean, there may be a case of that with like a president who's totally blackmailed or something, but if they're not actually blackmailed, that guy has autonomous decision-making capability and will make autonomous decisions at times. So, does Putin have more power and influence than Netanyahu? I mean, I don't know if I would say more, but he certainly has his own sphere of power. I mean, he's able to do things that go against maybe what Netanyahu wants, like with Iran, like with Hamas. And he has a military behind him. He's got a big police apparatus. He's got one of the strongest militaries in the world. I think they're stronger than Israel. So, I mean, Russia and China are not nothing. They're not nothing burgers. I mean, they have massive militaries that could probably beat Israel in a war. So, yeah, it's hard to quantify exactly who has more power or whatever, because Israel has the U.S. backing it and whatnot, but Russia has China backing it. So, I mean, it's It's comparable. Putin controls all his resources and his oligarchs. Yeah, I mean, these people trying to do this whole JQ bit about Russia, Ukraine. I mean, Putin tried to shut down the Jewish agency in Russia because the Jewish agency was helping Russian Jews move out of Russia to Israel. The purpose of that agency was to make Aliyah, was to get Jews out of Russia to Israel. And some Russians were like desperately trying to find some Jewish ancestry so they can go flee Russia so they can get out of the conscription. And so that was why Putin was trying to shut down the Jewish agency, because they were helping move people out of Russia that he wanted to conscript. So if they're being conscripted, then obviously they're not running him. You know, if he's shutting down the Jewish agency, obviously they're not running him. And he's arrested a number of Jews in Russia who are wealthy. If they criticize him, he didn't arrest them because they are Jews, but he arrested them because they were critics. And he arrested many non-Jews who are critics, like Navalny, and have them killed as well. But Putin has the power. Now, these schizos will try to say, oh, that's great. That's why we like him, because he has more power than these Jays or whatever. It's like, okay, so he gets to kill as many people as he wants, so long as he doesn't relinquish power to Jews. That's their thing. That's all they care about. Like, that's their one trick ponies, dude. They don't give a fuck about anything else. This, what I noticed is, like, they will give a pass. So if the leader that's killing the white people is himself white and is not, you know, a typical libtard on politics, maybe aligns with some of their views, then they'll give him a pass. He gets to kill white people. You know, that leader gets to kill white people, and that's one of the massive flaws in the white nationalist scene. Is like, you know, are they really pro-white then? So they claim they're pro-white, but then they support the mass homicide of whites, so long as the guy doing that mass homicide is himself white and aligns with some of their political views. So then you're not pro-white, man. Like, you support mass homicide of whites so long as whites do it. And this is almost mirroring that BLM worldview. It's like these black activists only criticize homicide when the white does it. You know, when the white cop does it, when a white person does racism, but never when black people kill black people, or when the cop's not white. Suddenly they don't care. So this is that they're inverted. It's really the same worldview here. So black people get to kill black people, and BLM doesn't speak about it because it doesn't serve the agenda. White people get to kill white people and do war, and do invasion and conquest, and we won't criticize it because the guy doing it's white. So we can't use it. And the only thing they're trying to use about it is do this Jew thing and try to, like, shoehorn their stupid fetish into this war to blame them for it, right? Like, so Putin, a non-Jewish Russian, invades Ukraine for Russian geopolitical and revanchist reasons, not Jewish reasons. And the only negative thing they have to say is about Ukraine because they have a Jewish president, and so they deserve to be annihilated. I mean, it's just the moral failure there, it's just repugnant, dude. I mean, it's just sick. And then on top of that, like, Putin's a multiculturalist. He doesn't truly fit their politics and their framing. So it's just nihilism. Did anyone with political authority come to the meeting? Someone from the AFD came. A bunch of other smaller parties came. This guy named Yves something, this French guy is pretty prominent, came. Fight Sport Talk says, during your interview with Trevor Luden, I thought Netanyahu was still the most powerful guy around, still getting out of the schizo JQ. I mean, if Trump is not following his orders, then clearly he's not in total control. I mean, he's got a lot of clout. I mean, I would say he's pretty. But the ICC recently charged Netanyahu. I mean, the UN votes against Israel a lot. So I mean, he's not all powerful. There's no such thing as all powerful, man. The anti-Zionists are almost all pro-Muslim. Yeah, I mean that it's a Muslim cause, right? All right, folks, I'm gonna end the stream there. Thank you very, very much for listening. Thank you for the comments there. I appreciate that. Good stuff. For sure. Yeah, I mean, maybe I'll make a longer video about that conference. I made a short video just giving some basic stuff. I did film a little bit in the little Italian town that I was in, which was pretty cool. It was not directly in Milan. It was a little bit outside of some good buildings and stuff that I filmed. I was going to do some interviews at the actual event, but just the way it was set up, it was hard to it was quite noisy. There was a lot of people in the room where you can get drinks. It was quite noisy and there's just too many people there. So it wasn't a good spot to interview people. And then outside, there was like this whole big press contingent that were there, and it was quite noisy there as well. And there was police around and stuff. I mean, I guess I could have tried to set up a few interviews, but just logistically, it was a bit more difficult because I would have to kind of set up my camera stuff outside and then come back in and try to like ask people to come out. And yeah, maybe I could have tried a bit harder to get the interviews, but whatever. It was just good to meet up with some of those people. Who pays for these events? I don't know. I mean, they did a GoFundMe fundraiser. Maybe the ticket sales itself probably funded some of it. Donations as well. It was good though, man. It was good speeches and stuff. Met up with these Portuguese guys. I met them in Spain when they came. They're associated with that Alfonso guy. They're good guys, and they are pretty much on the same page with almost everything I put out. So they're pro Ukraine. They don't buy into the schizo shit. But it takes us breaking down why this stuff is bullshit and why it's schizo shit, like we're doing today, to wake people up, because most of these people are lazy and they're not going to do their own research. You know, they're not going to read the material. They might watch a video, but most people are either they're lazy or they just are too busy to do it. So they need some influencer to basically do it for them. And so far as I am kind of an influencer, I'm happy to do it. But okay, thank you very much, folks. Please subscribe. And yeah, I hope you have a great rest of your day here. I'm going to log off. And yeah, peace out, man.